Well, good afternoon to y'all. I hope you enjoy the showdown today at the OE Corral. My name is JM, and I'll be your sheriff for today's proceedings. We got two men who have a beef, some conflict between them that they look today to resolve. Gentlemanly like, of course. I will hope a fair fight. No blues below the belt. No, no spitting. No throwing dirt. As we show down about operational excellence at our here corral. I have them introduce themselves. First, we have our bandit, the varmint, the much maligned Mr. Eric Ruvers.
Hello, everyone. So I'm Eric Ruvers. I'm head of solution architecture for Eris in Software AG, process management consultant for over 20 years, and running the business development and solution architecture in Eris now for the last couple of years.
My goodness, it just chills me to the bone to hear you. But worry not. We have our hero today, the bounty hunter, a man from afar come to solve this here town's problems. Introduce yourself, a lawman by his own hand, Mr. Michael Shank.
Right. I'm great to be here. So Michael Shank, I'm author of the book Digital Transformation Success, which details how a process framework can drive everything from transformation through operational excellence. I was a lifelong consultant, 13 years at Accenture, 25 at EY. So I've been in a lot of transformation situations, a lot of challenges at a lot of different clients. And I developed this process taxonomy framework that I think is the solution to all operational excellence needs. Great to be here.
Ace high, Mr. Shank. Mr. Shank here has a bone to pick with Mr. Ruvers. Today's conversation will be a no-holds-barred shootout. However, I will interrupt the participants periodically to inquire as to the next topic. But if you, our friendly townsfolk, have any ideas, things you need answered, queries on your mind, please put them there in that Q&A. We'll have our panelists, our combatants, our belligerents get back to you with many answers to your various queries. But we start out now. I must ask our lawman, our man of justice, take it into his own hands. Today here we're talking about operational excellence. OE at this here corral. I need you to start us off by giving us a definition, something that our folks can chew into, get their hands around. What is operational excellence, Mr. Michael Shank?
Absolutely. Great question. So it's simple. It's just ensuring that your organization is consistent execution, optimal performance, and efficiencies in all the way you run your business. And I put this graph together, which just shows some of the sample metrics that are involved, but it's bottom line efficiency. So it's making sure that you have the right cost profile. And there's a lot of organizations struggling with that today with the state of various economies and inflation, et cetera. Reducing complexity, making sure that your employees are engaged and motivated to do the right work. It's being strong in risk management, which I'm sure we'll talk about now, but understanding what processes are executed in your business and making sure that your risk teams have visibility when they do risk assessments and define the appropriate controls. But there's above the line growth too. So enhancing customer experience and I put on the line scalability and agility. So it's all about efficiency and how you drive change to the market, your time to market, making sure that you can respond to the competitive pressures. And that ultimately can lead to business growth. So greater sales, inorganic growth and mergers and acquisitions and rolling out better products and services. So excellent topic. And I think it's very timely.
I acknowledge the corn. You have hit it on the nail, or the nail on the head. But Mr. Ruvers, I think you take a bit of offense with this. There's not a complete model here. What would you add? What holes would you shoot into Mr. Shank's argument here?
So it's a really good opening shot. So it's very difficult to shoot holes in this logic. But I'm going to try anyway, because that's what we're here for. Operational excellence, we talk about it like it's a process problem. But if you would ask the man in the street, in the saloon, about operational resilience, about operation excellence, sorry, let's keep myself on track here, operational excellence, they would tell you this is a people problem. It's all about training people, setting the right, getting the right culture, the right mindset. How would you respond?
Oh, I completely agree. I mean, it's definitely a people problem. We have leaders that don't necessarily understand their business. We have, most people in the organization have somewhat blinders and only really understand their scope of responsibilities, but they don't understand the big picture. So you really need to lay out what everyone does, make it transparent, understand kind of how all resources tie to it, and get clear on accountabilities and metrics so that there's clear alignment between, and I always say from vertical alignment, so from leadership down to individual contributors, everyone knows what their role and responsibility is in driving this agenda, and horizontal, so making sure that all the teams work together. There's no silos from business to technology to risk to data, et cetera, et cetera. Everyone is on the same page in terms of how they collaborate to drive this agenda.
So how you may make a big claim that organizations are a bag of nails, everything topsy-turvy. So how, Mr. Ruvers, would you see an organization, something like a taxonomy, take your shot? How would you put that together?
So first of all, I think operational excellence is perceived as a program by many. And I would argue that it is part of how you run your business. It is more than a program. A program has a start and an end. It has particular, specific goals it tries to achieve. And when they're achieved, you can go to the next program. I think operational excellence is a mindset. It's a culture of holistically identifying where are the opportunities, where are the problems, and how can we jointly address them across our people, our processes, our systems, our reward systems, our structures, what have you. So I disagree with some of the people that will put operational excellence as first and foremost a people problem, because I think it's bigger than that. And also I think I would argue that it's not a program. It's rather more a function or a capability, even better.
Well, it's a capability, Mr. Shank. How do you structure
I agree. I mean, I think programs are needed because a lot of organizations are just stuck in where they're at. And I think there's a couple, and I actually agree with Eric, but I think there's a couple important components of it. First, you need leadership to drive the agenda. And I think a great tactic here is something called democratized innovation. So you need to arm your people and build the culture that they could test new innovative solutions.
Maybe I'm just missing it, but it seems like Mr. Shank's taking a knockout punch to the chin. Down for the count. So talk about ominous people, getting them ready to go. Let's talk about you, Mr. Ruvers. So how do you govern a practice of operational excellence? Because I see when everybody is involved, sure, there's many folks in the town square, but everybody has a different opinion.
I'm sorry, I lost you guys for a minute.
Oh, no
Mr.
worries.
Ruvers, how do you equip all your people?
So I think that we need to recognize that there are different centers of gravity in an organization. There are people. So I think the overview that Michael gave there was really solid. There's those that are really concerned about risk. Everything gravitates around risk. Then there are parts of the organization who have a people perspective. So they look through the lens of people when they look at how are we running the business. Obviously, if we look at IT, they look through the technology lens at the organization. I think processes are they are like the strong nuclear force. They are the gluons of the organization. They're the force carrying particle that will keep the organization running smoothly. I'm not going to take this too far because obviously a nuclear fission or nuclear fusion analogy doesn't really go well with the theme of this webinar. But I think the role of the BPM team is going to be critical in aligning the various different perspectives and showing how all of the resources across the organization collaborate, not just in an organizational structure like a hierarchical point of view, but as a lateral collaboration model. It shows how everything and everyone comes together to produce an outcome. And I think the BPM teams may not be always aware of the fact that this is the role that they need to play. They need to show what the interdependencies look like. And that is the first step of bringing people to the table and making sure that they can make joint decisions, can make a joint analysis, that they're all on the same page with regards to how we're running this business today and how do we need to change the way that we run the business in order to meet the challenges of tomorrow.
All right, so you're trying to get a fighting force together, a militia of sorts, to make operational excellence a reality. But I got to be honest with you, our townsfolk around here, they yapping their jaws, they be questioning some authority. They don't want to do what you want to do. So when we take a look at perhaps the big bug, somebody at the top, do we need a mandate to make these people fall in line? How do you group, how do you entice many to come on board your vision of the future, you vomit?
Well-organized militias, right?
Yeah.
So obviously we need a mandate, but it is not everything is contingent on us getting a mandate to do what we need to do. I think the mandate follows once everyone sees the importance of continuous alignment across all the various different functions and keeping everyone on the same page. Once you recognize that it takes work to keep everyone on the same page, to make sure that everyone has the same information about the way of working at all times and is involved in decisions about how to improve it, how to de-risk it, whatever you want to do, then the mandate then is not about the company becoming a process company. The mandate is about just having the ability to maintain that joint core of information. That's what we need a mandate for. So top down, bottom up, it's both.
So you say that there is a mandate required. Michael Shank, you've been sometimes a lone gun.
Sorry for the internet issue.
I don't know much about that, but what I will say is that when you take a look at your time, many times going from town to town, consulting on how to do this, does it always require a mandate? Our man Eric Rivers seems to think so, but what have you seen of bringing people together, united around a cause? How do we manage and how do we entice people to join up with our cause of operational excellence?
I think it does take leadership. I mean, leadership is important. They have to direct people, and then they have to arm people with the tools and the information, because I don't think, people need to understand how the entire environment works, not just their landscapes. What is from responsibilities are, and you need to have a collaborative environment to drive some of these efficiencies. If I could take a second, I want to show the slide. If it'll let me share. Yeah. So I think the key to getting to operational excellence, one of the keys is getting to systems thinking. So it's an understanding that organizations are understand that relationships between them and the interdependencies. And understanding those relationships is the key to driving operational excellence. For you need one unified model of what your organization does. And the diagram on the right really shows that I believe that process is the ground truth. So understand your process landscape, all the processes that each organization does, then you could leverage that to tie to your strategy and make sure that what your organization is doing is directly aligned to what your leadership wants. It could tie to what processes work with various customers. You could use it as a platform for risk management, enterprise data, applications, et cetera. So if you could get this connection right, this ground truth, it really is the key to unlocking all organizational knowledge. So it's transparent to everyone how the environment works and what they need to do to drive improvement. It's a common language to facilitate conversations across different stakeholder groups. It ensures clear accountability. So if a function is not working or is underperforming, you know exactly who to go to from a process owner perspective, from a technology owner, from a risk owner perspective, and get them really to focus on it. And it's really the way to getting to this data-driven decision-making and information around driving your operational excellence agenda.
Well, I like that. Make sure you clean the plow of that organizational resistance. And I must say, the promise here is very big. Mr. Ruvers, tell me a little bit about some of the value you're going to be getting, the use cases by which operational excellence looks to help drive improvement, to solve organizational challenges. And when you achieve some of the things pictured here on Mr. Shank's slide, what can you see as a focus for the organization that comes out of that?
You know what? The capability that we're discussing here affects essentially everything in the organization.
Everything.
So you need this in order to drive quality. You need this to drive compliance. You need it to drive growth. You need it to drive resilience. You need this to drive opportunity. The opportunity, for example, that is the product of the digitalization efforts that we're doing. The digitalization provides us with the opportunity to create new kinds of services, to improve on the experience of those services. On the other hand, the same digitalization is now exposing us to new threats. So we need to make sure that we prevent any kind of disruptions coming from digital vulnerabilities. And we need to understand how to respond to those disruptions if they do occur. Everything comes back to defining collectively, how do we want to run this particular part of the business, as a business as usual, but also if something goes wrong. So what do we fall back to then? All of that is process, all of that is ways of working, and all of it is a collective concern.
Well, my friend, I think you're becoming a curly wolf here. Mr. Shank, I believe Mr. Ruvers is trying to push us in the direction of operational resilience. And I know we will get to that topic, but before we fall upon that sword, where are we looking outside of that? More use cases. I think you may have some ideas on what we would be facing when we talk about operational excellence as a core.
Yeah, so I have this slide, and let me, before I go into this, I just want to define kind of how you build what I showed on the previous slide, which is you need a taxonomy that describes everything your business does, and not an APQC kind of generic taxonomy or a business capability model, but you got to capture all the details of what every organization does, all the inefficiencies, the redundancies, frankly, where all the dead bodies are. So in order to do that, you need to do an interview process where you start at the top and just ask people, what is it that you do? So you start with leaders, give me the layout of your organization. You go to their teams, what is it you do? Go to their teams, what is it you do? And you take all the answers and you turn them into verb, noun, process names. But ultimately, then you have a full taxonomy of everything that organization does. And I'm a big believer in formal attestation. So I go back bottoms up and get everyone to to formally, send me an email or some kind of workflow, but some electronic record that says, yes, this is accurate and complete. Then I could do all my data. There's a lot of data in the organization, such as maybe your application repository or your GRC for risks and controls, or your third-party risk management, et cetera. But if you can integrate that data with this process taxonomy, now you have a full understanding, or I'll call it operational intelligence, of everything your organization does. So back to this chart, and I'll start maybe at 10 o'clock, but if you have a strategy that's set by the C-suite, now you could map it to specific processes that need to change, and you could drive to that accountability. So it's mapping strategy directly to impacts and getting more objectivity in how you fund your projects, so that your funds are actually are directly going to your priorities. You could use it to define a transformation, everything from defining the strategy, managing the journey, or creating the roadmap, et cetera. Everything in the change process. So, if you have an SDLC, you could define your scope via project charter on what processes need to change. You could do a target operating model if it's a big change to understand what's the impact of people, process, technology. You could develop your requirements right under your process name so that it remains aligned to the ownership and accountability. You could test your processes. You could do people change management. So understanding the impacts of procedures, job aids, and training. You could do operational excellence. So not just in a Lean Six Sigma understanding how do I fix one or a set of processes, but looking at the organization from a 30,000-foot view level and say, where do I have waste and inefficiencies that can drive improvement more at the leadership level. Enterprise architecture design. So those people that are defining the IT environment, it's got to be business aligned and agile in the face of future change. And arming those teams with more detailed understanding of what the business does, I think arms them with everything that they need. They need to build a better technology environment. And then last, and this is obviously where Eric is going, is risk management. Understanding every process, every activity in your organization so that you're clear and complete when your risk teams do assessments. You could prioritize your controls and make sure that the business, if an organization follows the 3 lines of defense models, is accountable for making sure that those controls are effective. So it really, I think, does everything that you need to do if you get this foundation to drive an operational excellence agenda.
Well, interesting. My goodness, you got a flannel mouth, my friend. That's some sweet talking to get us hot on the use cases. But Mr. Ruvers, I think you pull it back to operational resilience. And why don't you take a spin now with operational resilience and see where the two of them connect to each other and why operational excellence is so important in the conversation on operational resilience.
Yeah, and it's got to be, I think this model is absolutely solid. So I have to, give it to my opponent here. The resiliency aspect has become really important because of the way that we are and the way that we entangle our resources across the organization. Again, sorry for the quantum physics analogy. The second time it's purely incidental. I didn't plan this. But all of these resources across the organization, they're so interdependent. If you look at the IT landscape, which is continuously evolving all the time, the ways of working around that are continuously evolving all the time, and our products and services that are evolving at lightning speed nowadays. It is so easy for vulnerabilities to open up, for weaknesses in the way that we secure our business. And we've seen some horrible bloodbaths, massacres in the market in recent years, where organizations of all kinds of sectors were not able to provide the services to their customers anymore, and to the extent that regulatory authorities have begun to step in and have really now started to tell organizations that they need to fully own the risk. They're not telling you to comply with a set of controls or to create a defensible position for yourself. You need to own the risk and you need to show how you're mitigating it. If they're not satisfied, they're going to come after you. And this affects everything. It not only affects, and I think this is a great aspect of the model that you're showing here, because it has the third-party risk management involved here. That's such an important part of the equation nowadays. If you own the risk of providing continuous services to your customers, especially if you're part of the economic infrastructure, like in energy or in finance, then you not only own the risk within your own organization, you own the risk across the entire supply chain. And the regulatory authorities, in the end, they don't care where the risk manifested itself. You are the one providing the service to the customers. You're the one that needs to mitigate the risk. So even if risk is, technically just one of the centers of gravity that we're talking about, right now, it's for most of our customers one of the biggest headaches that they need to address. And you're on mute, my dear friend.
You might end up yourself on Huskow, which or jail. Now, Mr. Shank, what do you think about where Operation Resilience comes in? Did that bandit get it all right, or where are we missing pieces?
I think it's a critical topic, and I think as Eric pointed out, the regulators are starting to get more stringent in their requirements, and obviously with DORA, the Digital Operational Resiliency Act for financial institutions, and in the EU is just a great examples. But I think other jurisdictions will soon follow. I'll start with a little bit of a story. So about 5-7 years ago, I was working with an insurance company. And they had, and if you guys remember the Texas ice storms that completely blew out all the power grids in Texas. Well, they had all their systems that did claims exclusively in Texas data centers. So you had a point where there's massive, and this is a property and casualty company. All their customers were experiencing deep impacts from this ice storm, and then they called their insurance company to make a claim, but the claim system was down, and literally the agents were having to write claims on sheets of paper and then remembering to put them in the system when it came back up. So I look at operational resilience. It's a huge data mapping issue because many organizations just don't have good documentation about how their environment works, because you need to understand where all your technology is, where all your resources that are dependent on it. You need to have a full mapping of all your processes, and you need to get the business to identify which are the critical processes that I need to maintain a minimum level of operations when an adverse event like a hurricane, ice storm, political strife, whatever it is, happens. You need to understand where your third parties intersect with your processes, and you need to go into those third parties and make sure that they're doing the right steps to be resilient. You need coordination, and I mentioned, between the business team identifying what's critical, the risk team so that they could do assessments, manage controls, do testing, and do all your event planning of when it occurs. But you need coordination with your technology so that they could look at the IT environment and build in resiliency and build in data center geographic diversity and redundancy and all the things that you need to do to be resilient. And that challenge, you need a huge mapping effort to do. And the only solution that I know of is to start with your process taxonomy, map all your resources, and then use that taxonomy as a common language to coordinate all this activity.
Well, I like that. I like that a lot. I see you equipping a bunch of folks with some real power to make a change. That's why I call you the Lone Star. But I will say one thing, and Mr. Roovers, Mr. Shank, both of you have rallied groups around you. Mr. Roovers, your gang, Mr. Shank, townspeople as you come on in. I must wonder the kinds of skills you look for in those who stand beside you in times of turmoil. I'll start with you, Mr. Roovers. You wish to see a gang of operational excellence team members. What do they need to know? Who do they need to be? What's in their hearts?
So I think the core is there's a couple of things that you need to do. So first of all, processes are not simple. Processes are hard to understand. The language that we used in order to map and document and analyze processes is a very specific language. It's a niche expertise. So the first skill that we need is the skill to make things simple. So one of the roles of in an operational excellence team is are the people that are able to architect a taxonomy that makes sense to everyone, that is written in the language that people understand, particularly in management, because I am not of the creed that says that everyone in the company needs to be trained on BPMN. I do not believe that. I will never believe it. I think that we need to be able to provide people with a record of and a documentation of how to work with excellence without having any training on BPM or whatsoever. So that's point number one. Point number two, creating those interdependencies or finding those interdependencies and creating the right collaborations across multiple different functions requires an architecture mindset. So we need people that understand how to think cross-functionally and how to bring people to the table. So those are process architects. And thirdly, we need people to take control, to take responsibility for cross-functional collaboration, whether it's to solve a resiliency problem or a quality problem or whatever you have, whatever you might have. So there we need management. We need people that can own processes and can own end-to-end value streams or journeys or whatever you want to call it, however you want to organize it. But you need people that can take charge of improvements and of the necessary programs to bring the company to the next level.
Yeah, it's an apple pie order if I've ever heard it. But Mr. Shank, what's your experience coming on in, riding into town, and making a force out of farmers?
I agree with a lot of what Eric says. I think it takes leadership. They need to understand this vision. They need to put their sponsorship and commitment behind it. You need to build a process capability or a process center of excellence or whatever you're calling it. But if you're going to create this taxonomy, and I always get this question, my organization changes all the time. Absolutely. So your process capability needs to be able to model the taxonomy, and you need to define standards so that it's understandable by all, such as verb, noun, and it can't be anything that's an inside joke. I should be able to read a process inventory from any part of the organization and have a good understanding of what they do. You need to have governance. So I mentioned the attestation, but you need to go back to the business on a periodic basis, 6 months or a year, whatever is appropriate for your organization, and go back and engage the business and say, is this taxonomy still right? Let's make whatever appropriate changes and then get attestation. You need to manage your data and obviously the great platform of Eris. You need to make sure that you pull all that operational data in, you're managing it, you're doing quality controls, et cetera. And quality is super important, because if your business and the people that don't that have to leverage this information don't trust that it's accurate and complete, then you've shot yourself in the foot and it could be hard to recover. Lastly, you need to, and back to that bubble diagram that I showed earlier, you need to inject this in the way of working. So you need strong leadership to guide the way and say, there is a better way to do requirements. There's a better way to do risk management, and get people bought in to using this common taxonomy, this common language to drive everything you do. And if everyone's working from the same business-oriented lens, then collaboration just gets so much easier.
Yeah, I must agree here that there is one thing that in my town I focus on, a skill greater than any other, which is communication. I feel like all this gets underscored, or I suppose trouble comes down at the mines when nobody talks. And if you have people who cannot communicate, whether that language is process, as you've said, and the ability to notate, or whether that language is through the models of change management, or whether that's through executive alignment, strategy, the ability to disseminate your vision and then see it realized and celebrate it when it comes about. That's everything about communication. So while operational excellence might be the goal, I feel like the core of it all is
Yep.
communication. Now,
Is that great line from Cool Hand Luke? What we have here is a failure to communicate.
that's the one. That's the one. Well, I must say about communication, I want to take a brief pause here. If y'all been asking questions, I see a couple coming through in the Q&A, but there's much more room for growth. I see you out in there in webinar land. Come, join us in this tete-a-tete. It's a type of conversation with our experts. At the end of all this, I'll be hosting a bit of a town hall. It's the last 15 minutes, we're asking these questions. If you don't get yours in, well, guess what? You're going to be passed over. But for the meantime, as we continue this conversation, you mentioned it, and those 4 letters are near and dear to my heart. I wear it on my badge every day, the word Eris. But there are other sorts of technologies that come around it. Tell me about the ecosystem. Mr. Shank, we start with you. What does that ecosystem of technology look like that powers a practice of operational excellence for an organization?
Sure. Well, there's obviously the platform of Eris and documenting this taxonomy and everything that your organization does. There's process mining, which I think is super important, which is, I talked about an interview process, and through no fault of anyone's, but people may forget or maybe not really understand everything that they do. So you need a check to understand, is this right? Am I complying with all the regulations, et cetera? You need a GRC platform, especially if risk and resiliency is high in your agenda. But you need to take that process taxonomy and make it part of your core GRC data model. So that taxonomy now is what everything risk and controls, all your regulatory obligations, what it anchors off of. And then there's obviously intelligent process automation. And that, I think the foundation of taxonomy will help you understand the landscape of processes, the connectivity, and the end of one process. If you're doing a BPM 2.0 process flow, could be the beginning of the next. So understanding that complete end-to-end cycle, maybe through a value stream or a customer journey, is critically important. And I want to introduce one more concept, which I think is going to be, has the power to be very impactful to this topic, which is digital twin. So if you could. And digital twin is just a virtual model or replica of your real world environment. So you have to model everything that your environment does, all the waste inefficiencies, all the idiosyncrasies. And if you could do that and back it with an AI engine and start feeding data with the consistent data labels of, say, process, and there's a lot of data, et cetera. If you could feed all that data to the digital twin, now the digital twin can tell you, where am I inefficient? Where am I not complying with regulations? Where do I have customer pain point issues? Whatever topic you want to drive, now you take the AI, and it's not in the periphery of process. When I say periphery, it's you could have it, craft better emails or look at contracts to say if the terms are favorable. But now it's really part of everything about how your organization operates, and it could be a powerful analyst to help you pinpoint what you need to address.
I agree. And I like to say a fool with a tool is still a fool, but the tool is important here. Now, Eric, taking your fair share and more, how has technology enabled you to achieve your operational excellence goals, or your clients achieve their operational excellence goals? What specific components of it? So Shank started on some of these model types, but why technology, and where does technology make a difference?
So I think that there is a pitfall. There is something that I've seen too many times, which is that because process documentation is seen as a big effort, that organizations are satisfied with having a small number of idealized processes. That's what they map. That's what they document. So they're well maintained, they're attested, and they're useless. Because as soon as something happens, where's your backup process? Where are the exception flows? If something happens, why did it happen in the first place? Where's the vulnerability that was able to get our services compromised. So I think a key capability, and Michael already mentioned it, that our clients are now starting to utilize is process mining. Not mining just to see if the process is working properly, but mining to identify all kinds of variations of the process, execution patterns that you were not aware of. And again, I'm bringing it to the risk and to the resilience part of the equation.
Please.
If you're working off, the back of documentation of idealized processes, you're not going to be able to find all of the vulnerabilities. You need to understand exactly how you're running your business. And because this is changing all the time, you need to be mining all the time to figure out if there is drift towards new variations. You need to find out if those variations are important enough to standardize and to document, or not to standardize, but document nonetheless, as long as you can't get rid of them. And the second thing is that through mining those processes, you're building a wealth of data. Talking about digital twin, this is a wealth of data about how you're actually running, how you're operating your business, which is a great asset when you start to improve the process. For whatever reason, it helps you to bring in that baseline data and to test, to simulate, to dry run improvements to the process. This really takes processes out of the realm of complying with a documentation requirement to really truly building a digital twin of your organization.
You need to be Simon Pure, as they say, make something that's the truth. And I must say, I absolutely abhor when I hear people saying, I got to make a process because I must make it deliverable. Oh, my heart does break, because just as a deliverable, what value are you offering? We're making documentation for documentation's sake. I ain't having none of that in my town. That's for folks who don't understand yet. And I'm glad, even with your spotty record, Mr. Roovers, and even with your well-meaning Mr. Shank, we get a little bit to the heart of this issue. But I gotta say, we've been going around in circles about some of these topics, and I'm sure everyone's head spinning. My head spinning in particular, around how you even get started this conversation. You're in a town, we haven't even touched operational excellence. We are just 2-horse, 3-stable town, more stables than horses because we're ambitious. And we don't have any idea where to start. So, Mr. Shank, let's start with you. What's my first step?
First, you have to start with your why. So what is it that you're trying to accomplish? What value are you bringing to the organization? What metrics do you want to have a significant impact on? Then that has a downstream effect on everything you design in your program. So, and the next step is then, what is your framework? So we talked a lot about process inventory and understanding the organizational context. There's org agnostic models like a business capability model or APQC, so that you could understand like processes across organizations. So you could understand, where you need to drive consistency or maybe remove redundancy. You need to think through, where are you doing process models? So every process that you identify in your process taxonomy can be a BPMN 2.0 diagram. But then what's your metadata? And your use cases are going to drive that. If risk is big in your agenda, then obviously aligning of risk and controls is important. If technology is, then the application data and all that comes along with it. There's other model types that you need to think through, like end-to-end value streams and customer journeys. How did they all come together? You need to define your use cases. Back to that kind of bubble diagram, is what are your target use cases? And that's, if you get people bought into changing the way of working, that's how you're going to drive your metrics. Because just documenting processes for documentation's sake, and if they just sit on a shelf, it's of no value unless it changes how the organization works. You need to think through your people model. What are the roles and responsibilities internal to your process capability? Like, what does a process modeler do? What does the control tower do? How do you define standards? How do you manage the platform? All that good stuff. But then external, what's the role of a process owner? Is there a role of a global process owner? What is a value stream owner? What is the role of leadership? And then finally, you need to understand, as you mentioned in the last question, what is all your technology? How does it come together? How are you setting those up in the right way? Then I would also say, this sounds like a big topic. You talk about process taxonomy for the entire organization. I wouldn't think of it like that. I think you could take one organization, maybe something that is a pain point, do your process taxonomy, integrate your use cases, and show value and demonstrate to leadership in a show, not tell method of how this works, and then gain momentum for doing it broader. It does take some cost and it takes investment. But I think once you can demonstrate how it drives this agenda, I think you'll get buy-in.
I'll see you, and I'll raise you a little bit more, because this is a starting conversation about who, what, when, where, why.
Yeah.
All your stereotypical questions, but Mr. Roovers, make it very tangible for me. How do I structure my practice? How do I even take the first leap at justifying this existence and getting started with working?
Well, I think there's two things you need to do in parallel and when you start. One is to get Michael Shank's book, because it's a synthesis of, I would say, 40 years of BPM thinking. So that's point number one. So you know what you're doing.
Yeah.
Then you need the tools. You don't go into a gunfight naked, right? So that's where you need Aris. The combination of all the various different process capabilities, process tools, combined, integrated. We talked about process mining and how it can help you to document more variations. Well, you need those two capabilities to be integrated. Otherwise, it won't work. It will, take you forever to document those variations. As just an example. So those are the two first steps that you need to take. So and I agree with Michael. It's really about showing the value as quickly as possible. It is not an easy topic. So whether your immediate problem is data governance or Sarbanes-Oxley or quality, or it is a migration, application migration, take on that use case, start showing value immediately, and then show to the rest of the organization, this is how we address the process dimension of this problem. Show them the problem itself, not just the outcome. Show them that there is a process dimension to the problem. Show how you solved it, and make it attractive to the next stakeholder to utilize those capabilities.
Well, gentlemen, I think we got to get a wiggle on, as they say, because we have a few questions from our audience. Thank you very much for quite the engaging conversation. Clean fight, no low blows. That was good. But we got some people from my constituency, the people of my town, who want to know how you might address their specific queries. Let's start with my good friend Florian. And Florian asked a question. Did I understand you correctly? You would document every possibility in a process, or would you stick with the Pareto principle? So 80% of the cases to simplify the process visualization. That's an excellent question, Mr. Florian. I'm gonna throw it over to Mr. Roovers to start with this conversation. What would you do here?
Obviously Pareto applies here as well. I was making the distinction between just documenting an idealized happy day process and not taking into account some of the key variations. So in one of the projects I was involved in almost more than a decade ago already, we established a rule which was there are 4 different business model archetypes that we're driving as a business. With either projects or products or software or services. That means that for every process, you can have at most 4 variants. Typically, you would try to have one process to cover all of it, but we know that things like billing in a project business model is different from billing in a product's business model. So you will have variation. So that's point number 1. That's the easy one. That's the stuff that you can document. But now, through process mining, you can figure out what different ways of working do we have, some of which you want to weed out. So you're not going to document them, but you're going to address them. People are using the wrong SAP transaction, not the one that we described in the policy or the standard operating procedure, but a different one. A backdoor into SAP. Not a good thing. We need to weed that out. So we're not going to document it, we're going to get rid of it. But then there might be alternative ways of working that are absolutely key to making sure that we are resilient. So we need to not only keep them intact, but we need to document them so that not only the people on the work floor understand that there's this alternative way of working that we can jump to in case of a disruption. We need everyone else who will be onboarded later on also knows about this. So I'm advocating for common sense here.
Yep.
Mr. Shank, anything you would add to this before we move on to the next question?
So it's a great question, but I would separate out your process taxonomy from doing your BPMN 2.0 or whatever language you do, process flows, because you having an understanding and creating just identifying what named processes are in the environment is super important for all the use cases, because you could do all your risk and control mapping, you could align procedures, you could do requirements off of them, et cetera. And I was in one large bank where I was head of process excellence, and this was the US retail bank. We identified about 10,000 processes once we kind of did all these interviews. Now, I don't think you would ever want to create process models for 10,000 processes. It just doesn't make sense. It wouldn't be a good investment. But you could identify then what are the cases where I need to go deeper because there's an inefficient process, et cetera. And then you create those models as you need. There's another, and one more point I want to make is there's a lot of, in a lot of like process documentation, it always focuses on core processes, which is important. Yeah. But I think there's also, and if you guys have ever heard of Parkinson's law, which basically states that the bureaucracy will continue to grow. And there's a guy, Parkinson, who was a British naval researcher, and he noticed during a period of time that wars and use of ships were going down, but the bureaucracy was growing. So I think understanding even the bureaucracy and making sure, and we've all kind of had seen inefficiencies from that, but understanding like, is that even right size so that I don't have to go through maybe useless checks or whatnot, that I could even optimize kind of some of those maybe non-core processes, I think is important. So I would focus on the process taxonomy and determine where you have to go deeper as a good kind of corollary to the Pareto.
That's an excellent point. I always like to think about it as rooting out suspicious processes, things I need to fully document because it's core to my business or something going wrong that's affecting my ability to execute as a business. I think that's a fantastic answer. I'm going to go to another question because I think it's interesting, very short but sweet. What would you reckon? Trade-off between operational excellence and real-time implemented efficiency. What would you reckon from Apurva? Talk to me about that. I know that's a big question a lot of folks have, is undergoing this practice versus just implementing efficient processes.
You talking to me?
Oh, I'm talking to you, baby.
They are two mechanisms that you both need. You need to be able to jump in and fix a problem. I mean, the fact that we have secured, fire safety measures, we have non-flammable tapestry, and we have, but we still, that doesn't mean that we can now abolish the firefighting unit, right? So we need both. We need to make sure that we can jump in, identify a problem, design the solution, implement it, go to the next problem. That's always going to be there. At the same time, we need people that take the helicopter view or the 30,000 feet view, and sometimes the ISS view, to figure out, okay, so what is going on here? Why do we continue to see problems in this or that area, and how can we fix this more structurally? So it's not a trade-off. It's two solutions that we can use at will.
Mr. Shank.
I agree. I think they work together. So, and as Eric was saying, I think you need one model that can describe the organization from a 30,000-foot view level, and then down to the details of what a specific activity does and maybe how it integrates with technology, et cetera. And there are different people that are involved in it. The 30,000-foot level is maybe your leadership or your C-suite that's understanding the big picture and you're driving your strategy. But it's got to tie and it's got to trace directly so that everyone is working in alignment, and having this taxonomy and this database of all operational intelligence is really a big enabler for that.
Yeah. There's another thing I like to think about. You want to fix an issue. Sometimes you got a process that needs a little bit of guidance. You take the reins. Sometimes it's a dog that won't hunt. And you need to find a new dog. Now, I got an interesting question over here. Given the potential of intelligent BPM, IBPM, to revolutionize process management, how can process excellence teams effectively convince senior management of its value and demonstrate its tangible benefits? Additionally, how can IBPM be leveraged to bridge the gap between theoretical process models and real-world execution, ultimately driving a more data-driven or AI-powered approach to process improvement and creating sustainable competitive advantages? Any specific use cases to share? My goodness, Cameron, y'all yawning the hours away with that question. Good one, but I'll start with Mr. Shank on this one. I've been giving Mr. Rubes a little bit too much time.
Yeah, I think it's still the same answer. I think, the intelligent BPM is just a new way of doing it, which is important. But I think you still need to start with your why. I think you still need to understand the use cases, focus on the metrics, and make sure that the artifacts that you're creating still support what the organization needs and how you change ways of working. So I don't necessarily, and I'd love to get Eric's opinion on this, I don't necessarily it's changing kind of some of those core principles. I think you still need to focus on value and making sure that you're building towards that.
Yeah, I think there's a use case that comes to mind specifically with regards to intelligent BPM, which is in basically what we've been describing so far. It's the entire capability where we can document, we can analyze, we can mine, we can bring that to bear on our documentation. We can support many different stakeholders, making sure that everyone on the same page, including all of the employees that have to work to work within and with those processes. The use case that comes to mind is in the area of experience, because of the way that we try to optimize and simplify the experience for our customers. The flip side of that is actually that our processes and systems on the back end are actually becoming more complicated. The more simple we make things for our customers, the more complicated things become within our operating model. So IBPM, intelligent BPM, actually helps you with, first of all, connecting on an architecture level. What are all the processes and systems that factor into that customer experience, that customer journey? And then you can use modern day process technology like process mining to figure out what is actually happening behind the scenes as a customer moves through the various different channels, various different steps, the various different services that you're providing. So this is a really new area where I think very few organizations are even aware of the power of process mining to get a better understanding of customer experience and customer journey. So this is one of the ways to, I think, show to senior management that the complexity of customer journey is such that you really need to invest in new capabilities, new technologies to get a better insight in what is happening behind the scenes as the customer has a better or a good experience.
Wow, I like that. And with only a couple minutes left, we got to burn the breeze, but I'll take the pleasure to answer my own question at the very end. There's more to this, of course, Mr. Shank. I think you should be following up with Dennis in the last 10 years of development, but I would say for a webinar such as this, I would appreciate strong Tennessee whiskey in whatever I got going on. In the meantime, I'm going to bid y'all a good afternoon, a good evening, a good morning to wherever you are. Thank you for joining us for this here shootout. I would say characteristically, this is a draw, but Mr. Ruber's going to make his way out of town, nice like, and Mr. Shank is going to maybe spend the evening in the saloon and then find his way on to the next one. But speaking of the next one, I encourage all y'all to fill out whatever survey comes your way and join us in future conversations with our thought leaders here with the Eris platform, here enjoying the pleasure of our thought leadership. Thank you very much for attending. Please give us a good rating as you do. And come back, y'all, very soon. Have a good one.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.